Hello, hello. Oh, okay, we're live. Hi guys, how's everyone going? Hopefully you can see me and hear me. I just updated a bunch of stuff. Looks like that's what I do every single time. Happy New Year! Good to have you guys here. Let me know if you can hear me all right. I think the volume is too much. Just let me know, because I did an update and I always screw things up every time that I do an update on stuff. Cool. Hey Ian, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. I'm just wrapping up a couple of things and setting this up. All right, ZBrush is working. Cool. I have everything ready. All right, so while we wait for everyone to join us today in the first stream of the year, the ZBrush Guides in the ZBrush Live stream of the year, I just want to get a couple of things out of the way. There's going to be a couple of guides coming up, ZBrush guides that I'm working on that have to do with the ZBrush compositor. Hopefully you have seen some of the things popping up online and people using it. It's really useful. If you don't know about it, you can go to the ZBrush guides right now and I think it's the latest one, so you can the latest guide, so you can have a look at what I'm talking about. But it's essentially a plugin that allows you to send whatever you have in ZBrush and send it to Substance Painter or Marmoset Toolbag 3 to finalize the composite in any of those software with textures, and take advantage of all the generators and the real-time lighting and all that sort of thing. So it's pretty cool, and so there's going to be 2 more coming up, just how to sort some issues out and some other stuff. That's one thing. Hey Javier, Happy New Year, man. Hope you had a good time. And on another note, on a slightly more sad note, the fires in Australia are absolutely insane. It's like nothing that I've seen before in anywhere, like as in being in there. I was in a holiday up north, Victoria, where I live. I live in Melbourne. Melbourne is part of Victoria, and it's absolutely crazy. I had to come back because of the smoke was at a hazardous level, so pretty dangerous, and the fire was coming really quickly, or expanding really quickly. So I had to come back to Melbourne. Fortunately, here in Melbourne, it's we're out of danger. It's just that the fumes and all the smoke is coming our way, so it's better to stay inside. But I just wanted to thank everyone that's been sending messages and all that. And again, as an artist, there's not a lot of things that you can do to alleviate all of this, fine nature in a way. So I thought I could donate some of my time and some money really, to the CFA, which is the Country Fire Brigade or authority in Australia. And unfortunately, the government is not funding a lot of stuff for the volunteers, especially. And the only reason I'm mentioning this is because I'm putting together a team. Fortunately, the ZBrush community is amazing, so I got a few amazing artists that are going to join me. I'm going to create an awesome pack for creature prototyping, and I'm going to be selling that for like $20 or something like that. And all the proceedings, all the money that pack makes, I'm going to donate it. So I'm just letting you know, because it's going to be let's say a temporary pack. I'm only gonna release it for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so, and then after that it's gone. So all the money goes into the CFA, and I'll share a link later on. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that, because again, as an artist, I feel that sometimes I don't have any other way to help out. So I thought this one is just really the easiest way that I can do something about it. And I'm letting you know, just because 2 things. One, because I know some of you guys are like always ready to help. I'm part of the community, so that's one thing. And the other thing is because it's going to be a temporary pack, so it's going to be available. So for a short period of time, and we're talking about, you know, it's a time sensitive thing, so we need to send the money to the people that need it very, very quickly. So that's another thing. Anyway, but it's a new year, so let's try to you know, brighten up the day, and let's start with something cool. All right, so let me just show you what we're gonna do today. Some of you might have seen one of these creatures that I did for the ZBrush beta testing 2020. So this toucan creature sort of thing. So I thought we can continue with this series, and I can show you like my approach to these, as well as some, you know, fiber meshing and that sort of thing. But in light of what I just said about Australia, I want to do something with the Australian animals. So one of my favorite, all-time favorite animal creatures from Australia, which is one species is native from Australia, is the Cassowary, and I'm sure you've seen that. Is like the dinosaur type of thing, bird. So here I have some quick references that I collected, and that's what we're going to be working on today. But more, I'm not going to recreate the bird itself. I'm going to do something very close, but it's going to end up being a creature, and also you know, to work on that pack that I mentioned earlier on, because it's going to be a series of insert meshes with heads, hands, torsos, and all that sort of thing. But yeah, this is kind of like what I'm going to do, and I absolutely love the Cassowary. So I get to work on this awesome creature. All right, so let's have a look. Hey Harp, Khalil, how's it going? Let's go ahead and start with the blocking. So I'm gonna keep it very simple, the blocking, and then we're gonna start moving things around with the move brush. So I'm gonna leave this sphere as the head, and I have symmetry enabled as well. And let's go ahead and bring in or append a cylinder. Cool. So I'm also gonna turn on perspective so that I can manipulate it from the side. This is gonna be the neck of the creature, the Cassowary creature. Extend it a bit more. Just as a fun fact as well, there are 3 types of Cassowary. I'm doing the southern Cassowary, like, yeah, three species. I mean, it's the same species, but 3 types of Cassowary. So there are 3, like they're easy to identify. They have, like, what's the name of this? Keep forgetting the Wattle. The Wattle, I think that's the thing. The kind of like the things that the turkey go like that sort of thing, with the like hanging from the neck. I think that's the Wattle. Yeah, so there are 3 types. One that doesn't have any, one that has 1, and the one that I'm doing, which is the Australian native species that has 2 of those. So I just thought it was a cool fact. Anyway, so yeah, so this is gonna be the neck, and I'm gonna use the bend curve. Yeah, let's use the bend curve modifier to basically give it a bit of shape. So right now, this is pointing in the X axis. So I just want to do it in the Y axis. This second cone here allows you to change the axis. So by default, I think, yeah, by default is in the X axis, and you can tell because there's 1 point from A to B, let's say from this distance, basically in the horizontal line or X axis. So if I push this one up, now it is from top to bottom, and if I keep pushing it, then it's going to be in the Z axis. So I'm going to leave it in the green one, which represents Y, and you have 2 points, and this little cone here at the top, it allows you to increase the number of points. So the idea is to create a few more points so that we can manipulate and give it a kind of like an S shape, like the more natural shape of the neck and the spine of the Cassowary. So I think 6 should be okay. Yeah. All right. And from this side, remember I have symmetry, or I should have symmetry enabled. There we go. From this side, I'm just gonna start pushing this back. So this is the kind of like the base of the neck. This one I'm gonna push it a little bit back here as well for the head. Oop, got an alarm saying that I have to get into the ZBrush live thing, which I am, so great. All right, yes, I'm gonna push this one back here and just playing around with the shape. Again, this is just the blocking stage of this creature cassowary thing. Okay, so I think that works. Probably it's too long. Exaggerated things a bit more. All right, and the great thing about this modifier, this specific deformer, sorry, not modifier, is that you can also scale things up. So if you select a point, you have 3 cones for each one of the points, right? So these ones, if you hover over the cones, it will tell you what they do. So the first one is just to scale. That's the one that I was referring to. The second one is to squeeze. So it's gonna squeeze or scale things down in an axis. And the third one is going to actually rotate it. So this one is really useful if you're sort of like doing, if you want to replace the workflow of using a curve brush, you can use this type of thing and have way more control over like the shape. So it's pretty good. I got a question. Let me just go back to that in a second. I'm just gonna finish up here my train of thought, otherwise I'll forget what I'm talking about. So I'm just gonna scale this up and then reduce the size a tiny bit here for the neck. It's a little bit too thick, I think. Okay. Click on the cog icon and click accept. All right, so that's it. So David, hey David, how do you put the skull in the top right? So the top right here, this is one of the new features of 2020, of ZBrush 2020, and it's called the cam view. So essentially, if you go to the preference palette and you go to, there's a new sub palette called the cam view. This cam view allows you to cycle through a bunch of different cam views that have like that have the axis, that have the color and the axis in there. So you can just go to side view, front view, and that sort of thing. I have sort of removed the default ones because I found this feature to be more useful to have like reference, in this case the skull. So generally speaking, I know where, if I'm in the front or the side view. So the cam view is not as useful for me in that sense. So what I did is just to turn it into a reference little guide. So I have a few, and that's why I put it here in my UI. I'll get to how I put it in here. I just want to give you some context of what this is in case you don't know. If I click next, it's just gonna cycle through different special cam views or custom cam views that I made. So I have like full body, so like anatomy reference. I have another one just for the face, and as I rotate, it just rotates to the different angles. So it's good for me to just have it there to remind me of where the muscle system, the muscle groups are, and that sort of thing. So you can look at it from different angles, and that's pretty cool. I have a skeleton as well, it's pretty good for keeping proportions. And the skull, which is again pretty helpful. It's a human skull as well. Okay, so the way that I put it in here is actually really simple. All you have to do is have a subtool, or whatever subtool you want to have in there. So just find a skull. You can actually go to the lightbox. Where is the lightbox? I think, which one has a skull? I think if you go to the tool and you open up Nick's or Ryan Kingsley, I think Nick Zuccarello has one. Let's just click on that, and you can see this one right here. This icon or this thumbnail is a custom view that I made that you can add to any subtool. So this is like completely different from what I was talking about, but I I can share this with you guys as well. Actually, I should put it in the ZBrush Guides. I don't know why I haven't put it in there. I can share it there, and basically you can put this in any subtool, and then it will work when you click on the color. That maybe doesn't make any sense, but let's just do it because it's very simple. I'm gonna open up the Nick Zuccarello's default man, and this one comes with a skull. So I'm gonna select the skull. Yep, and I'm just gonna go ahead and delete the rest of the pieces. Cool. So we have the skull here. I'm gonna unify that so that it fits the 2x2 that ZBrush works better with. So this is the new skull that I can use as my reference. And if I want to be able to click, let's say, the y-axis, the x-axis, or the z-axis to quickly rotate, which is what the default cam view in ZBrush 2020 does, and what I got rid of, that's what I did this subtool. So let's do it. So if I click on this to load it, right? So these colors are pure red, pure green, and pure blue. So all I have to do actually is just go to, I'm gonna give it a flat material, so that is easy. Flat material, flat color. Actually, let's go to the skull first. Select the material that you want. You can have poly paint, anything. So for example, you can have the skull yellow and just go fill color or fill object. So now the skull is yellow, and let's give it maybe a basic material. This one, for example. So I'm gonna fill that just with material, just with the M selected. All of these switches that I have here, you should have them at the top of the standard UI. So fill object, cool. Now we can just keep working. I'm gonna take this subtool. I'm gonna copy it, go into the skull, paste it in here, and I think I'm in solo mode. Oh, okay. Cool. All right. So something like that. This is going to be just a reference to move around, but you can have absolutely anything that you want. All right. Let's go back to the flat material. Remember that we assign the gray material or the gray matcap to the skull. That's why it doesn't change. But now that we have this here, all we have to do is go to the preference palette. And again, you can have anything that you can put in the canvas as a 3D object is going to become a cam view. Like, or you can, oops, you can make it a cam view. So in the preference palette, you go to the cam view, and you have this button that says make cam view. You can, the size doesn't matter when you create it. It just changes the thumbnail that you can see here on the right hand side. So I'm going to click make cam view, and ZBrush basically creates I think it's every 45 degrees and 8 sort of levels of elevation, a series of images. So now this is going to be my cam view, right? So I can move around, and I have the little skull based on the different views. And if I click red, as you can see, it just, because of the colors that I use in this little axis, it just lets me go to the different views. So front view, if I click again, back view, right hand side, left hand side, top, and bottom. So that's how it works, and now it's permanently there until you reset ZBrush. And let's go back to the Cassowary. Right, so I have the Cassowary here, and I can just, you know, see where it's pointing at with the head. So yeah, I found it to be really useful rather than knowing exactly where you are, because I usually start my sculpts with symmetry, so I know sort of where my sculpture is pointing at. Rather than having this thing, I just thought it was a great way to actually create a reference for, you know, other stuff like anatomy and things like that. Also, the thumbnail on the left hand side is pretty useful when you're blocking. But yeah, anyway, if you want to save this, you can just save the, I'll tell you how to save it so it doesn't disappear. So where is it? So texture. So here's the texture that ZBrush created when I click create cam view. If you save this in the cam view folder within the ZBrush installation, every time that you open ZBrush, it will be there. But because I haven't saved it, as soon as I click next, it's just gonna go to the ones that I've saved and go through those, and now the one that I created disappeared. So let's go back to the skull. Alrighty, so hopefully that answers the question. Cool. Alrighty, so let's continue with the cassowary. The next sort of primitive that I want to use is a cone for the beak. So I'm going to take the sphere and I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to bring in the gizmo, and I'm going to choose this cone 3D, and this one allows me to interactively change the amount of subdivisions. This is going to be ultimately probably a Sculptris Pro, so doesn't matter, but I think that's fine. And I'm just looking here very quickly at the reference. It's quite long, and it's almost the entire head, really, or the width and the height of the head. Okay, cool. I'm gonna leave it there. So that's just the blocking, and this is the process that I use in my 5-day challenge, the ZBrush 5-day challenge, which is, it's available again in case you didn't know. If you go to the 3D Concept Artist website, there is a 5-day challenge, ZBrush 5-day challenge, and you can follow along. And this is basically the process that I use step by step to generate a concept in only 5 days. And I have updated it with 2 new concepts that are pretty cool. So if you're interested in this, more in kind of like a guided step-by-step process on how I block things out, you can have a look at that. I'll share a link later on. All right, the other kind of like big volume that we have to block in is kind of like this, the crest of the cassowary. So I'm just gonna keep duplicating. I'm gonna duplicate that cone, and I'm gonna change that to probably a cube. Yeah, probably a cube. No, let's just use a sphere. All right. It's gonna be just a sphere here, and of course we're gonna squish it in the x-axis, and let's just try to set the size. Okay, so something like that. So very basic. This is just a series of basic geometric shapes, but then once we have these ready, we can start blocking out the rest. One thing that I probably want to do, you know what, let's just leave it as it is. I'm gonna before I merge everything, I'm gonna bring in my move brush, right? And we have 4 subtools, so it's gonna be easy to just move between the things, the different objects. Make sure that I have symmetry enabled for all of the pieces, and I'm gonna select the crest here, and I'm gonna start also, by the way, enable AccuCurve so that we get this more pointy effect. And with a large brush, I'm just gonna start working on the shapes, on the silhouette. And this is why having the thumbnail like I have here is super useful. By default, the thumbnail, and I'm gonna show you this so that you can change it if you want to. The preference tab, the preference palette, you have a thumbnail, this one here. By default is set to, by default is something like that, and it's also I think it's smaller like this, so which is great, right? I just went to the size and increased the size so that you see more of it. The only problem with having it like that is that if I'm working on something close, or if I put this one on the left hand side, it's always going to be on top of whatever I'm working. So it's a lot of screen space and real estate that is wasted in that white color. So what I do is go to the preference palette, and you can change the background of the thumbnail to be whatever color it is. So as soon as you click on whatever color you choose, could be yellow, ZBrush is gonna use the complementary color to fill the silhouette. So if I click and drag to yellow or blue, so the complementary color is gonna be green. Yellow. If I select yellow, it's gonna be blue, and so on and so forth. So if I select black, ZBrush is going to interpret the black as transparent, and it's gonna give me the silhouette as white. So if I get closer, you'll see it's behind that bit of white, so I have more real estate. That's the only reason I did that. But it's extremely useful to be able to set up, you know, this type of things, like the blocking of whatever creature you're working on or character or prop, whatever it is. So I'm just gonna play around with the shapes a bit, following some of the reference. Again, it's not gonna be exactly any of the reference I have, and I have reference of only this type of cassowary, the southern cassowary. I'm gonna go into the head, and I think I'm gonna merge the head with the beak before I move on. So I'm gonna select the sphere, I'm gonna merge that down. Okay, so now if I go into solo mode, this is a single piece, but we can also go ahead and dynamesh it. So let's hold Control, click and drag, and we can also smooth that out a little bit. All right. Oops. All right. So the only reason I did that is because it's gonna be easy to set where the eyes are going to be and the ears. It's pretty weird. It's an awesome looking creature. Well, like it's a really good reference for, you know, I really like this character. Well, not the character, the animal itself, for many reasons. Not just because it looks cool and it just looks like a living fossil, but also because there is a really nice nature got it right already. So it's a really nice way to see how things transition into another, or like how different surfaces and surface details transition into another. And if you look at that as a reference, you can't go wrong. It's really, really cool. All right, so I think I'm gonna start working on the neck a little bit more. And now that I can see the head is a bit bigger, so let's compensate with increasing the size of the neck. From the back, and the base of the neck is gonna be a bit thicker. We're probably not gonna do the rest. I mean the body as a cassowary. Like I said, I want to do kind of like a creature. So I don't know, maybe it has some kind of clothes or something, just to make it more, humanoid in a way. Can exaggerate this a little bit, and I'm also, as I do these movements with the move brush, and I'm keeping an eye on the thumbnail and some of my reference that I have on the second screen. All right, let me see how we're doing with questions. It's only half an hour in, so we're pretty good. I think we can leave the block out today done and just wrap it up in the next one. Cool. Do you believe that that's Agelus Dracados? How do you believe drawing and real sculpture lessons might help me to be a 3D artist? Thank you. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Anything that you do to further improve your, or expand your skills is always helpful. I was talking about this a few streams ago, I learned to, like, what I studied was actually animation, like 3D animation. That's like, I'm an animator by trade in a way, so that's what I studied. And doing animation in 3D, it really, I think it gave me an advantage when I transitioned to kind of like being a 3D concept artist or like a sculpture artist, because, you know, having to deal with motion and understanding the you know, the weights and the way that kind of like the body mechanics work and the movement. I had to study anatomy and that sort of thing. So just by doing that, it really helped me to transition into the digital sculpture, and that's just from an animation point of view. So yeah, absolutely, anything that is your passion, I would say go for it. And maybe it's not directly related to sculpting, but it all helps. And you're talking about drawing and like real sculpting, so absolutely, that's even more relevant. All right, I think I'm just gonna push the eyes a little bit forward, so we have some space for this hole here, which is the ear of the cassowary. All right, and at this point I have only used one brush, just the move brush, nothing else. The rest is just, you know, it comes from the blocking, the primitive blocking, using the primitives, and now I'm just using the move brush, nothing else. I think this is fine. Okay, and oops, I think this thing is not right in the center, which is weird. All right, let me just try to. I'm gonna push this thing in a bit. Oops, turn off symmetry, push that in. Not that much. Okay, and I'm gonna just do a mirror and weld. See, it wasn't in the middle. Don't know why. Must have moved it. Okay, cool. And I think I need to increase the thickness of this bit. So there's one cassowary. I don't remember which type it is. I think it's the one that has only one wattle, and that one has at the top here of the crest, it just sort of like splits, not splits, but it just creates kind of like this effect, which is pretty cool. But I'm not gonna stick with one type. I'm gonna push this in. All right. You know, this might be a little bit boring to watch because it's just blocking it in. This is the same thing, repetitive action. But we can talk about other stuff while I do this. Should maybe exaggerate this even more. Looking at the thumbnail, I think the beak is too long and too thick, so actually more stylized, subtle. And of course, because we use a cone, it has like the cone shape, so probably it's a good idea to just flatten it a little bit so it makes sense. All right, I think we can move to the next stage. I mean, the front is not, I think the front, let's push it all closer. The front is a little bit too wide. I think for some reason I must have rotated or moved things because they're not in the center. So I'm just gonna do a mirror and weld with everything. See, it's not in the center. It's weird. Must have rotated somehow. Okay, mirror and weld. So now this is in the center. Symmetry on. I don't know what happened there. All right. I think that's cool. And let me just fix a little bit of the top area of the head. So again, I really like this. What I was saying is that I really like this type of creature. He's hang on a second. This is still not in the center. Mirror and weld. All right, now it is. I like this type of creature or animal because of the transition between the different surfaces and the different type of textures that you get. So it's really interesting, and I mean, when you work and you try to replicate something that nature has already gotten right, you learn a lot of the little things that will help you to, you know, apply the knowledge into your own creatures, I think, or into your characters. So I'm just doing a tiny bit of tweaking here at the top. This front part is way thicker. And I'm not sure what's the evolutionary advantage of this crest here, because they have like also super strong legs, and that's how they attack you. But it's nevertheless it's a pretty cool design, this creature, or this cassowary. All right, now before I continue tweaking these things, I think I don't want to separate the beak, because like I said, it's nice to work in the transitions. I'm actually gonna combine everything together, but before I do that, I'll probably want to do some cleaning up. I mean, it's pretty clean. It's just this head that is a Dynamesh with lots of resolution, but I could just add the eyes probably, and that's gonna give us a good point of reference to work around the eye area. So let's do that. I'm gonna append a. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I'm gonna append a sphere. There we go. I'm gonna do a quick save as well. And do you have a? Hang on. I'm just reading at the questions. Oh, by the way, let's just turn on the chat so you can see. And I'm gonna turn off the thumbnail. So, Limbo is asking Spanish, ¿has modelado alguna vez en estilo cartoon simétricamente como un logo sin animar? Súper complicado para el espejo funcione. So, Limbo is asking if I have ever modeled or sculpted a cartoonish asymmetric style for a logo. Yeah, and probably not for a logo, but I would say for certain assets that might look like a logo for characters, I have done that. You can use the shadow box for that. It's pretty easy. A pretty easy way to create a mesh that, especially that is asymmetrical, and you can just load a black and white image and extract the masking of that. And it's a very easy way to do it. You can also create it from an alpha and then just refine it. Rogue artist, are you standing? Yes, I have a standing desk that I can also put up and down. So if I get too tired, I just sit down, but I try to stay for the most part of the day standing up, and especially when I'm doing live stream, I feel like I have more energy to speak and to work, because if I'm sitting down, I just like sort of, you know, start working like this, and it's like a bit boring. I don't know. Whereas if I'm standing, I can move a little bit more, and you know, some of my friends said that I speak very animated, as in like I move my hands all around, so it just makes it easier. But yeah, sitting the entire day isn't healthy. Yeah. Maestro Mouse. No, I do speak Spanish, so it's all good. I can understand what you're saying. I'll just translate it for everyone else. Cool. All right. By the way, I'm planning to do Spanish sessions as well, or live streams in Spanish, so that we can cater for everyone else. Okay, so let's go ahead and place this head. Sorry, the eye. I'm gonna put it in the right-hand side of the character, and the eyes are quite prominent, they're quite big. So this is gonna be a good point of reference to, if we place this, and this is something that I would suggest you do when you're working on characters. Once you place your eyeball, try not to scale the eyeball or fit it so that it fits within the structure that you have already created. Try to find a match or for the exact size of the eye that you wanna create. That doesn't make any sense. let me put it this way. Like if you're doing a humanoid, figure out the proportion for the right size of the eyeball, put it in place, and then once it's in there, you have a great reference to sort of work around it and make it work. So this is what I'm doing. I'm looking at the reference and I'm trying to gauge how big the eye is in proportion to the rest of the head, and it's quite prominent, quite big. But of course, the little eye sockets that we created in this mesh are not as big. So that's what I'm saying. You can set the size of the eye first, and then work your way around the rest. So I'm just gonna push it in. Maybe it's too big. Okay, and it's kind of like in the middle of the head. We'll probably have to extend the beak a bit more. It's too small. So let me do that first with a large brush. Cool. And I think we also have to extend this a bit more. It's interesting how when you're copying from a reference, but you don't have the reference like right next to you, as in the screen, you sort of like look at it and you said, yeah, I got it, and then you start working, then you look at it again and it's like, well, no, let's start redoing the proportions. But that's why it's so important to work, not go into details straight away. So we have just a bit of resolution to work on the main proportions and the blocking stage, really. So let's take this eye, just push it forward a tiny bit more. I think the placement is right. Something like that. Maybe not too much. All right. I'm going to go ahead and mirror and weld this together. And because I have it on this side, it's going to be on the positive side. So now we have the two eyes in a single subtool. And now that we have this, we can go back to the head with the beak, and we can work around these areas. So I can start, covering the eye a little bit, knowing that the eyeball is the right size and in the right place. It makes it a little bit easier to work. And the Cassowary has like this overhanging piece of, looks funny from the front. It's not as threatening as from the side. We're gonna make it a little bit more creature-like later on. But yeah, it has this skin that hangs in here, where the beak sort of like splits, like the corner of the mouth, and that kind of like looks like a zygomatic arc for a human person. A human person that's completely redundant. A person or a human person. All right, cool. So I think that's a good starting point to get into the sculpting. And let me just check other things that I can block out really quickly. I'm gonna push this up a bit and give it a bit more of a neck here at the bottom. Although if you look at it from the side, this is going to be, from the side, this is going to be probably more like that. But it's not a solid piece. It's just part of that Wattle thing. Alrighty. Cool. I think we are good to go and get into the sculpting mode. What I'll do is, this is something that I do often, and if you are a regular viewer of the streams, you might be familiar with this. So I'm going to create a folder, new folder. I'm going to call it OR, call it like originals, and then just put everything in there. And I'm going to switch this off, like actually, let's just leave it as it is. So I have everything in one folder, and I'm going to select the cog icon, and I'm going to click on merge folder, and ZBrush is going to merge everything that is in the folder and give me a single piece. So now this is just a single subtool. Obviously it keeps all the meshes that are not doesn't share a continuity in topology, but I keep all the originals, and now this is a single piece. So now what I need to do is separate the eyes so that I don't merge them with the Dynamesh. I'm going to hold Control and Shift, click on the eyes because they should share its own polygroup, and I'm going to go ahead and split hidden, which for you guys should be under the split palette, split hidden. So now we have the original in case we want to go back to the blocking stage and rethink things a little bit. But yeah, now we have two subtools. The eyes, so that I don't, they stay where they are. I don't merge them with anything. And now we have this mesh that I can turn into a Dynamesh, or I can actually work with Sculptris Pro. So I think Dynamesh will be fine, just to keep refining the silhouette, and then we can move on to Sculptris Pro to define some details. So let's go ahead and click on Dynamesh. That's too high. I'm gonna set it to 32. That's too low. Let's set it to, I don't know, 80 something. Dynamesh. That's all right. Okay. I'm also going to give it a single polygroup with Control W. All right, so this is kind of like the sketch. Let's go ahead and clean it up a little bit. Just, oops. Activating symmetry, and just in case I'm gonna do a mirror and weld, but it's fine. It wasn't in the center. All right, I'm gonna hold Shift and start smoothing things up a bit. I'm basically wanna remove that sort of what's the name, the faceted polygons that you can see from the low poly res, the low poly mesh. The low poly res. I've been quite redundant today. I've been redundantly repetitive. All right, cool. So this is now a single mesh, and we can start actually sculpting and defining some areas a little bit better. So I like to start with a damp standard brush to mark certain pieces, and this is kind of like a technique that I go into much more depth into the course that I teach online, the extra mile. I mean, that's we have dedicated modules entirely to like this type of process, but as a general rule, I like to start with the damp standard brush to mark out the areas that I'm going to fill with volume. So it's like if you're a traditional sculptor, you will have a piece of clay, and you take a knife or just a palette or whatever, and then you start like slicing things just to mark the proportions. I'm gonna do the same thing with the damp standard brush. And once you have that piece or those markings ready, then you can take new pieces of clay to just add more, or just chip away and remove parts, but you're sort of like filling or subtracting volume from those markings. So that's roughly what I'm going to do. Hang on. Look in the mirror and are ready. For me, it's difficult. I'm not sure what you mean. Not sure what you mean, Limbo. Abner, can you speak Portuguese too? A little. I used to be better. I used to live with a bunch of Brazilians. Really nice people, and that's I think I've told that story before. But anyway, I used to live with a few Brazilians in Melbourne when I first moved in. When I first moved from Costa Rica to Melbourne. But I didn't know any English, so I learned English here in Australia. I came to learn English, and the Brazilians that I was living with, they also didn't know any English. They also came here to learn English, but yeah, it was funny because Portuguese and Spanish are, I think, is pretty similar. So we had to, in order to communicate, is like, for example, who needs to wash the dishes or whatever, and we were living together, so we had to communicate in this weird Portuñol Spanish, and a mix of Spanish and Portuguese language, which was pretty cool. And once you start like learning more about it, more about the differences and the similarities, you sort of like I wouldn't say that I was the best, but I could like hold a conversation pretty easily, and I can understand pretty well, just because I think it's pretty similar. But yeah, living with the Brazilians definitely helped, and I don't know, I think I'm just generally interested in languages. I think they're really, I mean, other than communicating, I think they're great. I don't know, I think I like how they sound. I would love to be able to speak more than what I speak. My girlfriend, my partner, she is from Ukraine, so I do speak a tiny bit of Russian, and I understand a bit of Russian as well. But that's about it. But yeah, Brazilian is more because I could fake a good Brazilian. I think I can do a little bit of the song accent that when the Brazilians speak, they have like this nice tune. I can fake that and just speak with a Spanish words, and if you don't know if you don't know Portuguese, you could say, oh yeah, this is Portuguese. So fake it until you make it. That was what I was doing there. Anyway, just speaking a little bit more about the sculpture, as you can see, I'm just like cutting and pushing things out. So holding Alt will just give me the inverse effect of the dumb standard brush, just to push things up, and the normal one is just cutting it. So it's just like a knife. So that's pretty much all I'm doing, looking at the reference and see which areas I need to bring in and which ones I need to push in. So for example, there's one here that connects nicely with the neck. I don't know much about bird anatomy, but I just follow the reference in this case. And then also here, but I don't want to go into sculpting mode and just filling in those areas and actually sculpt, because that's the next step. So right now I'm just marking where the volumes should be, and then we'll come back and work on those a little bit more. Cool. And I think one of the trademarks and important things about this creature, this cassowary, are the wattles, or the double wattle. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe if someone knows and want to look it up, maybe I'm just saying that word because I remember it, but it might not be the one. I'm talking about the like flappy thing that they have on the neck. I think it's called wattle. I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm not pretty sure. That's what I'm asking. But yeah, it should be. Anyway, I'm bringing my Epic pen, yeah, so that I can tell you what the wattle is, in case wattle is not the name of this. So the wattle, I think it's called wattle, is these like flappy things that hang from the neck, right? So that's the wattle. I think it's a wattle, and this is a trademark or a unique thing, a feature from this cassowary, from this type of cassowary that I'm doing. Wattle is how the says is indeed wattle. Ah, yes, yeah. So it's wattle. This is the wattle. Maybe I wasn't pronouncing it properly. Anyway, so this is kind of like one of the trademarks of this type of cassowary. This other cassowary, I think, is the one that has this a little bit more pronounced, like sort of splits here, and that one has just one wattle. and there's another one that is a tiny one. I think it's like a dwarf type of cassowary that doesn't have any. It has like, you know, tiny little crest like that, and it doesn't have anything here. It has all the nice colors and everything, but anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with the sculpting. I'm like, I love, you know, natural history and biology and all that. I think that's one of my other passions or hobbies, just to read about like animals and stuff, because I like it, but also it helps inform my work and the creatures that I do. Actually, I got a really nice Christmas present, which I want to show you. So it's called The Life on Earth by David Attenborough, and is absolutely fantastic. So this as a point of reference, just like reading about it and reading about the different animals and stuff. But I mean, this one is probably not the easiest. It's like a flying frog. But it just gives me so many ideas for the creatures and the you know, the creatures that I do and the characters. So these type of things really inform my work. I know sometimes it's a little bit tacky. I don't know, tacky, but you know, people say, "Oh, what inspires you?" And you say, "Oh, nature inspires me," and that sort of thing. But I think it's true. Like, I think if you really get into it, there's so many things, and everything works. Because if it exists by definition, evolution got it right, and it works. So if you follow and copy things from nature, it's going to make it feel real, or like it could exist, even though it is a creature. Anyway, this is another one of my very favorite ones, the pangolin. So as soon as I see this, I just go, right, this is nanomesh, right, or something similar. Let me just put this away. But anyway, we digress. We were talking about important things like portuñol and all that. Let's see, how are we time? Oh, 1 hour, perfect. Cool. Sorry if this is a dumb question. No dumb questions here. But why didn't you block out the beak as a separate piece? Because I want to work on the transitions. So if you look at the cassowary, doesn't have a very defined different. Well, like, it's not very defined, the beak, the difference between the beak and the body. I'm gonna bring in the reference that I'm using. So see this one here. The beak is almost like, it just, that's what I love about this type of creatures or animals. Like, it just fades very nicely, and the way that the transition works between the actual hard part of the, like the exposed part of the skeleton, which is the beak, into the skin is just flawlessly, right? So maybe this one is not very good resolution, this one either, but my point is, like, you have this, maybe this one, you have this nice transition, so you could totally separate it, but I want to be able to, by sculpting and working on the actual sculpture, like adding details, I want to be able to do that transition and work with the, you know, this area that has concentration of details and all that wrinkly skin with the more you know, polish and flat areas, or, you know, simple areas. But anyway, that's the reason why. You can totally do it separately and then merge it after, doesn't matter, it's up to you. Cassowary, all right. Portuñol stream, yeah, we can do a portuñol stream. That'll be interesting for probably 2 people. Buenas noches, Sergi. Cool. All right, Wikipedia says, yeah, awesome. Krampus, love your work. Oh, thanks so much, Campus Vu. Glad you like my work. All right, let's get back to this. So dump standard brush, editing, well, setting up the main areas. So I'm gonna take from the side here. So the wattle comes from the lower beak, right? So it starts from here. So I'm just going to exaggerate this part of the lower beak, the lower part of the mouth a bit more, and then this goes down like so. So you'll see it's very rough what I'm doing in terms of establishing what these things should be. And in fact, we can actually go ahead and use the mask pen and then just mask some of these areas, because again, these will affect the profile quite a bit. So right now it just looks like an S, but this should be affected a bit more, I think. Okay, so I just masked these areas. I'm going to invert the mask by holding Control, click outside in the canvas, bring in the move brush, and then just push this forward. Okay, so that's kind of like the silhouette that I was trying to get. Let me turn off the chat for a little bit and bring in my thumbnail back again, so I can see how this is affecting the silhouette a bit better. And probably gonna bring the inflate brush. This is getting too thin. If I go ahead and smooth this out, yeah. If I smooth it out, it's going to be, it's not gonna keep the shape that I want. So that's when I would use something like Sculptris Pro, for example, to smooth with Sculptris Pro enable. Just wanna make sure that I push things enough. All right, clear that mask, and actually let's go ahead and bring in the smooth brush. So I'm going to hold Shift to enable smooth brush, and I'm going to enable Sculptris Pro. So I can just use Sculptris Pro here to maintain that volume and smooth that area with more polygons. So if I enable polyframe, you'll see I'm just adding polygons in these areas that I need to. Okay, so that's one of the good ways, like why I like the Sculptris Pro so much. But let's keep going. Let's keep it simple. Only this area. I'm going to bring in the move brush, and I'm just going to tweak the neck a little bit more. And I feel I should make it a bit wider, especially here at the like the root or the end. The tip is like maybe too thin. Alrighty. And let's go ahead and simplify things a bit more. Just looking at the reference and seeing that maybe the neck is maybe too thin. The other thing is, like, you also have to, when you're looking at reference, is good to figure out, I mean, it's hard to do it, but it's good to at least have a sense of the lens that was used to capture whatever image you're using as reference, because that will change. For example, this is without perspective on. So if I enable it, now slightly different. We're gonna get to that. I'm gonna keep it off, and then just because some of the photos that I have a very shallow depth of field, and that signifies that the like if you know about photography, like the aperture like plays a big part on that. So it looks like a little bit maybe flatter, or the sorry, not the aperture, the type of lens that is used. So if it's captured from the distance, it looks and you do a zoom in, it's gonna look a little bit flatter, and that's kind of like what I have in my reference board, and that's why I'm trying to do it without the perspective on. So once I set up the blocking, we will go back to perspective on and play around with the sculpting. But I think it's the blocking is coming along nicely. I mean, from the distance you cannot tell. At least you can say that it's a bird. With all the colors and everything else, you'll definitely, I think you'll identify it as a cassowary. Just adding a bit more volume here by pushing things out. Remember that I'm not gonna do the complete thing. Actually, I'm thinking of making it into a character, like I showed you at the beginning, with the kind of like the series of the toucan, like a creature, but this one it's a bit more intelligent, so it would have some clothes. It's not just a creature. That would be, I mean, that's the idea. I'm gonna block in some nostrils because they're also very prominent here. But for that, I'm gonna hold Shift again, enable Sculptris Pro, and just to smooth this area a bit so that we can get more resolution. And I'm gonna use the damp standard brush again with the Sculptris Pro enable, and I'm gonna go ahead and set this up. So I think I need kind of like a line here. Just looking at the reference here, it's roughly something like that. Okay, I'm going to increase the brush size so that it doesn't add as many details. Okay, we're getting into the detail territory now, but I don't wanna do it just yet. I wanna make sure that I block in these areas, and keep it simple for the rest of the head. All right, I think I flattened it too much, so just gonna use the move brush, lift things up a bit, and also push it closer together. And again, always checking the profile is a good idea. This is kind of like a flat line here. So let's just quickly do the good old edge polish without Sculptris Pro, and we just flatten this and smooth it just to keep it flat there. Okay, I think other than this, maybe around the eye, we can actually block in some smaller lines using the damp standard brush and Sculptris Pro. So that could be something. Just gonna find a close-up that would work. I think, all right. I just have one of the reference up that we could use for this. So let's go ahead and bring in maybe the. I'm just thinking what would be the best way. You know what? Let's keep it simple. I'm gonna keep doing it with the damp standard brush. I'm gonna go into solo mode just so that we can push this a bit up and get the lower lid a bit thicker. Because if you leave the eyes on, like the eyeballs, is not gonna, like, seriously not gonna pick up that volume. So if I leave it on like that, and I try to do this, right, it works. But then I go into solo mode. We'll see. This one is not the greatest example, but I prefer to just push the volume without the visible tool that is sort of intersecting the geometry, and then arrange it around it. So this is going to be a bit thicker, maybe a smaller brush. And wraps around the eye. Same thing here for the upper lid. And this one is the one that starts to merge and transition into the beak, which is super awesome. All right, these are lines. This is not detailing. This is not sculpting. These are just purely lines that I'm setting to then fill it and refine the volumes. But I think that gives you a good idea of what the main shapes and the main volumes should be. I'm gonna refine the line here between the two beaks, the top part of the beak and the bottom part. And I can reduce the brush size. That's gonna give me more resolution. All right, cool. I think that's working fine. And of course, there's gonna be a lot of work around the neck in terms of the, you know, all the intricate fluffy, not fluffy, wrinkly skin. But we'll get to that at some point. Probably not today. I think today we just leave it as the blocking. Although it's only, we have about 45 minutes, so I think we can just block something out, make it a bit interesting. All right, so I think I'm going to block in the Wattle, and I'm going to show you an interesting technique so that you don't have to redynamesh with a higher resolution. So what I mean by that is, if you already started using Sculptris Pro to block in certain parts, like this in this case, so I have some areas that are very dense in terms of polygons, and some others that I don't need to have as much detail. If I want to, let's say, append like the Wattle thing or something else, if I want to append it and merge it together, and I want to make sure it's part of the same mesh, back in the day, well, before Sculptris Pro was introduced, you could just redynamesh, and everything will be part of the same mesh. But then if you want to keep all this resolution, you will have to increase the dynamesh resolution quite a bit to maintain those details, and therefore everything else will be like super high res. But you can use the the merge by Unity. Anyway, I'm going to show you what it is. I forgot the exact name. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do a quick save because I haven't done it. Quickly check the chat. I'm going to turn off thumbnail. Let's have a look. Sergi, ¿cómo haces para poner todas las herramientas en un solo lado? So Sergi is asking, how do I fix, or how do I set up my custom UI and put all the tools on one side of the UI? There is a very detailed guide in the ZBrush Guides website. So you can just go to the ZBrushGuides.com, and you go to the tutorial section, and you can just sort by productivity. So in the tutorials page, the tutorials will be at the top. In the tutorial page, you can sort by category. So if you put productivity, then there is a dedicated guide that talks about how to customize your own UI. But all I did was just the same way that you have the UI on the left hand side, I just push it to the right, because I'm right-handed. I'm using a Cintiq. So if I always try to access things from the left hand side of the screen, it covers my work, so it's easier for me to have it on the right hand side. But you know, it will depend on your workflow. So if you are left-handed, for example, I would say it's the opposite. You might want to have more things on the left hand side, but up to you. Not just a shark chicken. No, it's well, you can call it a shark chicken. That's a mouthful. Shark chicken. Okay, where were we? Oh yeah, the Wattle. So for the Wattle, I'm going to bring in. Actually, we can do it with the curved tubes. So I'm gonna select the curved tube, and with symmetry enable, let's see, they're pretty long actually. Yeah, just gonna try to find a reference of it. Yeah, they're pretty long, so I'm gonna click around here, and do something like that. I probably want to go to the stroke palette as well. Stroke palette, and I'm gonna dog that to the right hand side, and I'm gonna click on lock start, so that this first point that I clicked is not movable. Like, you cannot move it. I mean, you can move it, but once you start refining the curve, this one will be always in the same place. So I think something like that. They should be closer, but I'm gonna increase the thickness of this later with the inflate brush. Or we can do it, you know what, I'm gonna show you something else. Just trying to give you some techniques in this blocking stage. So yeah, you can leave it like this and then go with the inflate brush and then just change the different thickness. But you can also do that from the curve modifiers if you enable size. As soon as you do that, the curve fall will be, the curve will be affected for this from this curve here profile. So because I enable size, I click again on this and you see it is thinner and thicker. So the left hand side of the interface palettes, generally speaking in ZBrush, they mean or they refer to the root of whatever you're using, and the right hand side refers to the tip. So the root point is this one, the tip will be this. So you see the root is at 0 and the tip is at 1. So I can flip this, for example, right, and click again, and now it's inverted. But I think the opposite way is actually better. I just need to tweak the thickness of this. So I'm gonna push this up 1 bit, click to update, maybe even more, update, and we potentially need to, you know what, let's add another point here, and that's just gonna change how the distribution of the thickness. I think that's fine. I mean, we're gonna still have to do things with the inflate brush, but if we can start with something better as a starting point, it's always good. All right, so I'm gonna click anywhere just to accept those changes, and we have already, you know, by default when you use a curve brush like this or any curve brush, everything else is going to be masked. So that is a perfect opportunity to just, before we clear the mask, use the inflate brush. I'm gonna get rid of the Sculptors Pro, and I'm just gonna inflate this a bit more because they're a little bit thicker. And also with the smooth brush, I want to reduce the intensity of the smooth brush a bit because it's too harsh by default at 100%. All right, so I think that's fine. All right, we can definitely sort this out, the transition, and do more sculpting about it. All right, another thing that I think is pretty peculiar about these Wattle things is that they're like just the flaps of skin. So they're not like this. They're not inflated. It's just thick. It looks thick, but it's not like, they're not full of air. So I'm gonna use the damp standard brush to actually cut in like so, just to flatten them a bit more. Yep, so I think that's a good starting point. We will continue working on this after we merge this a bit more. In fact, I think I should actually push this forward a bit more and take the body, invert the masking, push that forward as well. All right, I'm gonna clear the mask, control click and drag. And now this is part of the same subtool, but it's not the same geometry. So this is what I was talking about before. So if I enable polyframe, these are exactly, I mean, these are two different meshes, right? I can just go ahead and Ctrl W to assign a single polygroup, but if I go ahead and smooth these, they're gonna smooth, you know, the smooth brush is gonna affect each piece individually as a separate mesh because there's no continuity in the topology. So what we need to do is merge this as a single piece. So before, the quick way to do it would be just to Dynamesh. So if I go and Dynamesh this, right, now this is a single piece, so there's continuity, and if I smooth that, it's a single piece, which is great. The problem is that all the details that we had here are gone because of the resolution. So the alternative was, let me just undo that. If we want to preserve all these details, the alternative was to increase the resolution to something crazy. Well, not crazy, but let's say 360. Dynamesh it. So now we keep all these nice details or markings that we did, but the resolution in everywhere is the same, and it's quite a bit. So when you're blocking things like this, we haven't even got into the sculpting and adding volumes, then it becomes quite hard to, it's not as easy to manipulate volumes and blocking things when you have that much resolution. So the workaround, which is great thanks to the Sculptris Pro and Booleans operation and all that, let me just show you what it is. I'm going to undo that. So again, this is a separate set of tools. I can actually go ahead and auto group, and because again they're different meshes, ZBrush is automatically gonna give them a different polygroup. But the way that I would approach this to merge them and make them part of the neck, for example, would be with the following process. So let's bring in the Gizmo 3D. I have a low battery in my wireless tablet. Why? Hang on, just got a warning. So far we've been doing we haven't got any technical issues, which is great. I don't want to jinx it, but I just got a warning. Anyway, so with the Gizmo 3D, I'm going to click on the cog icon, and that's going to bring the deformers, and I'm going to click on this remesh by union. So that is kind of like running the Boolean operation only on whatever subtool you have selected. So anything that is intersecting is going to be unified. So I'll explain that in a second, so you know what's happening behind the scenes, but I'm going to use remesh by union. Whoops, there's some masked areas. Make sure there's no masking. The mask part, oh, sorry. So I had symmetry on. All right. Remesh by union. Accept. Done. So now this is part of the same, it's the same mesh. It's watertight. So I'm going to explain this really quickly. So let's say if you have a mesh that is like this, and then you have another one that you sort of intersect with that. So they're actually intersecting, but they're separate meshes. So with the remesh by union, what ZBrush does is it does a Boolean operation. Boolean by union. So it just analyzes the entire volume, and whatever there's intersection is actually going to merge them. So it's going to take these points here, and they're going to merge these points and these points, let's say, and whatever is inside these points is going to delete it. So the result is just a mesh that is exactly the same everywhere except in these areas where ZBrush had to put some little points and triangles. So that's what happens behind the scenes. But if you get closer, that's exactly what happens, right? So in fact, we can go ahead and hide some bits and pieces, and going to double. You see behind this mesh is open, right? So this is the same mesh. Let's bring back everything. So if I go ahead and hold shift to smooth this, it's going to smooth. However, because in order to merge these two things with the Boolean operation, ZBrush created some triangles. So this is not going to look as neat. So that's why Sculptris Pro in this case is really, really powerful. So let's undo that, and let's bring in Sculptris Pro in the shift or the smooth brush, symmetry enable, and it's going to add more geometry. So remember that with the Sculptris Pro, the size of your brush determines the amount of resolution. So the smaller the brush, the more resolution that you add. So I think this one is fine. I'm just going to have a look. Okay, so as you can see, I'm basically adding resolution in the areas that these pieces intersect with each other. Right? And obviously there's going to be triangles and stuff, but now that we're using Sculptris Pro, it's not a big deal. All right, and let's do the same thing here. Just add some more in there. Cool. So I'm gonna refine these volumes really quickly with, again, the damp standard brush and Sculptors Pro enable. All right, I think in terms of blocking this, we're ready to go. All right, so I'm gonna do a quick save. If you guys have any question, just drop it into the chat. I think we are good to go in terms of, like I said, blocking it in. So what I'll do is I'm gonna duplicate one of these this subtool, put it into the original folder just so that we can keep it there in case we want to go back. And then we can go ahead and start using something like the clay buildup brush or the clay brush. I have a custom one called PM Custom Clay Buildup that has slightly different settings. Nothing too fancy. It's just I found it to be more useful, at least for me. And it just builds volumes a little bit slower than, it's kind of like in between the curved tubes, sorry, the clay tubes and the clay buildup. In fact, let's just use the clay buildup. Doesn't matter. Clay buildup. Okay. I have Sculptors Pro enable. I'm gonna turn this off, and I'm gonna use the clay buildup to build up volume. You might get a we might hit a point that we actually need to dynamesh again, and we will lose some of these details, but that will be after we sort of add more volume. So remember that line that I created here, it was quite sharp. So all I'm doing here is just trying to blend it or work in the transitions between this part here and the rest of the head. There's gonna be some skin here that is folded, or that it folds over itself. And when we add the details, it's going to be pretty prominent, I think, or like very easy to identify. So yeah, this is just a matter of adding the volumes. Now that we have sort of placed some of the cutting lines, I'm just going to work on the transitions and add volume where I think should be, also following the reference as well. So this area should be a little bit thicker. And when you're working with, when you're working in thin areas like this, probably this is not a big deal or a big problem right now, but you can enable backface masking. For you guys, should be under the brush palette. Let's see, brush palette in here. The brush palette, auto masking, backface masking, that's the one I'm using, and that will prevent you from, you know, accidentally push the back faces of a thin area too much. So I just want to add a bit more volume here. Okay, so we might have to, this is an area that I will need to pay more attention to, like work a little bit closely to the actual reference, but roughly this is what's happening. There's some kind of a air duct in here. That's pretty cool. Okay, so the rest would be a transition between the actual crest, this part here, into the beak. But again, as you can see, I'm trying to follow those lines that we marked before. Cool. I'm also going to push in a little bit these areas with the Alt key. There's some weird little points. That's sometimes the case with the Sculptors Pro, so I'm just going to enable it in the smooth brush and just smooth that out. And I think we're in good shape. I'm gonna keep adding some volume. I mean, this becomes a bit of again a repetitive action, but it's it's necessary, and this is where you should spend most of the time refining the volumes before committing to do any details, really. I'm gonna turn off the back face masking because it doesn't work with Sculptris Pro. Enable it, and then I'm just going to smooth this area just to add more volume, not volume, more resolution, so that we can work and add more crisper volumes. And this is another way that I like to work with Sculptris Pro. When I'm blocking, when I'm not doing details or anything like that, and I'm just blocking, I like to use the smooth brush with Sculptris Pro. So if I hold Shift, enable Sculptris Pro to add the details, or to add the resolution, and then turn it off to just work with the normal whatever sculpting brush I'm using, it's gonna be faster than using Sculptris Pro. Try to find the good balance here. Oops, that was close. I think I froze there for a second. Okay, I'm gonna check the chat, see what's happening. Rogue ad is up, but what is the point in Boolean? The model will be subdivided later anyway for detailing polypaint. The point is so that you can keep doing the blocking with the resolution that you currently have. So if you dynamesh it, or if you do I don't know, a series measure and subdivide it like you said to add more details and all that, yeah, you will end up having a single mesh. But I'm not at that point yet, so I'm not adding details, I'm not thinking about details, I'm just working on volumes and transitions. So it's better to have only resolution, or enough resolution in the areas that you need to. And for example, here in the beak, there's no need. Let's say if I wanna, okay, I'm just gonna give you a practical example of that, of why I did what I did. So right now, if I follow this closely, that's not very good. I'm gonna exaggerate it so you can see. It sort of feels, there's some spikes. It's a bit blocky, like that, right? And the current resolution, pardon me. So the current resolution is quite low, right? If I do what you're suggesting, like dividing everything and have a lot of resolution everywhere, trying to fix this is gonna require either a very strong smooth brush or a lot of time to make sure that it's polished. Whereas if I have this at the current resolution, which is, you can still see the polygons, they're quite small, it's going to be very easy to just manipulate those and get them right before I decided to move on and add details. So I can just take a smooth brush and smooth this very quickly and get this as it is, or like as I wanted to. So for example, smooth brush, simplify that shape. But that's something that you won't be able to do as easy if you have lots of polygons. That's why it's very important, I think, to block and work with as low resolution as you can, and then work your way up in terms of details. So obviously I have some areas that have quite a bit of resolution, which is not too bad, but those are just purely to describe certain volumes and wrinkles that I want to maintain, so like the main ones. But this is not detailing, this is just still a very rough sketch. We haven't got into the detailing stage, which I would do once I have the main folds and the main shapes ready. I will do a retopology and start working a little bit more thoroughly in terms of adding details. So at this point, again, it's all about working in the, working with the volumes or adding volumes, make sure that the volumes are right. They feel right. They feel, part of the same part of the same mesh, or like, that's what's the word? They feel integrated with the whole project before I go into too many details, because again, it's gonna be harder. But you know, it's up to you. If you think if you can work easily with that amount of polygons, more like a traditional approach with lots of like, if you had a ball of clay and you just do that, you can totally do that. It's definitely something that you can do. It's just, I found personally this way of work is a little bit easier, and that's the way that I teach it in my class and in the course that I teach online, and so far it's giving me and my students great results. So I will encourage this approach, because I know that this is the kind of like the process that I think it works. that's as easy as I can put it. I think it works, and if you stay true to the process and follow the steps, I reckon you can get very good results. So you see, I just move between the clay ball buildup brush and the move brush, just to keep refining the shapes a little bit. And this is a very interesting shape, or not shape, a profile line. So right now I have something very smooth, or it's like not smooth, but something like this. And in the actual reference that I have, the lines is a little bit, the lines here, or the cuts or the breaks of that line, or that silhouette, is a little bit harder or harsher. So it will be something like this, right? If I want to go more towards the real, or copying the references. So in that case, that's why I mentioned it's good to have the low poly. So it's gonna push this in just to sharpen this corner. And of course, the larger the brush size, or like the bigger the brush, the easier it's going to be to do any large proportional changes. So as you can see, it just keeps changing. And of course, like this particular shape, it's gonna be different, I reckon, in each Cassowary. I mean, slightly different. So we can be a little bit, we can work on the design of this a little bit more freely than other parts. But I think it works. It works as it is. Alrighty. So let's see. Let's answer those questions, and we have about 15 minutes. I think this is a pretty decent, block out for today, and we will continue working on this, refining, adding the details and the colors and all that next session. But we can do a little bit more today. Let's see. Ricky, by using smooth brush with sculptures turned on, you get increased polygons in the areas you are smoothing. That's correct. So the brush size will determine how big those polygons that you're adding are. So if I enable polyframe and I hold shift to enable Sculptures Pro and I smooth this area, it's going to be pretty big. It's actually going to remove a lot of the polygons. But if I remove the size, if I change the size to something smaller, which is what I was doing in here, this is what you get: smaller brush size or smaller polygons. So that's what I said, that I like to use the smooth brush to add details. So for example, if I want to work on a volume here in this area, rather than just going with the whatever sculpting brush I'm using, let's go to clay brush, right? You can enable Sculptures Pro and you can start doing this, right? And add volume at the same time that you add the topology, or add more topology. You can totally do that. I just found that it is faster in terms of how I work. It's very personal. That it's easy to have the geometry there before you actually start sculpting. So the way that I worked with Sculptris Pro in this case, with when I'm sketching, is to enable Sculptris Pro in the smooth brush, and before I actually add the volume, I generate some extra polygons like that, and then I can, without the Sculptris Pro, very quickly work with more resolution in that area. So it's kind of like an extra step. So you might not want to do that, but another good thing, or another way that you can do this, I just need to remember how it's done. You can actually do it from the brush palette. This is something that I don't use often, but you can totally do it. Let me see if I can remember what it is. All right, so in the brush palette, you have this Sculptris Pro sub palette, and you have the use global enable, the global settings. And I think enable it. Let me just see. All right, so enable, disable. Yeah, okay. So sorry. So with the enable and the use global will use the global setting of the brush for all the brushes. The Sculptris brush. Sorry. With the global settings, Sculptris Pro settings are going to be across the board. So what I did there was in the clay builder brush, I disable the Sculptris Pro, but if I hold Shift, it's going to have its own properties, the Shift brush. So basically now I don't have to enable and disable Sculptris Pro. Now I have Sculptris Pro just in my Shift brush, and if I let go of the Shift, I'm going to go into my clay builder brush that doesn't have Sculptris Pro. So in other words, without turning it on and off, you can hold Shift, smooth an area with a Sculptris Pro, and then keep sculpting without Sculptris Pro. So you can do that from this enable panel here in the brush. It's really useful. I don't use it as much as just simply switch. I have the button in my UI, so I can just switch between the two. So I'm gonna undo that. So hopefully that answered that question. This is good to know. I'm working on a piece with folds and tunic. Yeah, it's pretty useful for that. Just keep in mind that with Sculptris Pro, like Dynamesh, it's just gonna create triangles in some areas. No, it's not like Dynamesh. It's going to create more triangles actually. Francisco, hi Pablo. How you know when you have to add detail in ZBrush or in Substance Paint in Mari, or both? Thanks. So that's it really depends on the end result, or what you wanna get out of each software. I personally like to work with details in ZBrush. It's really easy, and export my normals from ZBrush into Substance Painter, and then continue working there and add like more high frequency details in there. Sometimes, especially for example with clothes and any type of clothes, I will keep it clean in ZBrush. I do the folds and everything and the wrinkles, but then in Substance Painter I can add kind of like the stitching and that sort of things. But it really depends on the final look that you're after. So with the Cassowary in this case, I would probably do all the details in ZBrush, and in Substance Painter I would add some high frequency details in terms of the skin pores and all that. But ZBrush is pretty is fantastic for that anyway. So it just really depends on what you want to get out of each software. If you want to do if I want to convert, let's say, this Cassowary into a real-time asset, you can still do the details in ZBrush, but it will be probably easier to just do it in the texture software, like in Substance Painter, to create all the textures in there, and then just have enough resolution to describe the volumes, and then all the details will be part of the normal or the displacement map. So it's hard to tell, like to give you a straight answer, because it will depend on the project and what you want to get out of it. But the good thing about ZBrush is, like, for example, when you're actually getting into the high frequency details, like wrinkles and pores and little scratches and things like that. If you want to do them in ZBrush, you can do them all in a layer. So you start recording layers and add all that in the layers, and then you can turn them all off, send the base, not the base mesh, but without the details, with the high frequency details, to Substance Painter, and then just try to do the same thing in there and just compare whatever is gonna make it easier for you. And after you do a few, you just get the hang of it, and you start to identify which point at which point you should send it to Substance or continue working in ZBrush. I think with the Cassowary, for example, that I'm doing here, I'm gonna take it all the way to to the end in ZBrush with polypaint and so on and so forth, because it's pretty powerful. But yeah, not a straight answer, sorry. Okay, thanks for the answer, Pablo. You reproject your details. Can you reproject your details to remeshed object though, and have even predictable topology flow? Absolutely. Like that is part of the workflow. Once you have your sketch ready, you just clean the topology, create your let's say your production ready mesh, and then project the details and clean it up. That's part of the process. Unless you want to just keep it as a concept sculpt like this. You can keep adding details with Sculptris Pro and then just call it finish. Hey, Apple. Is it only in the skull a separate sculpt? No, it's just the cam view. I talked about it and explained the skull that I have on the right hand side at the beginning of the stream. You can rewind, and it's at the very beginning. I mentioned how I did it and how you can do it. Are you always standing while working? Most of the time, yes. Most of the time. Not when I'm doing admin stuff. So when I'm writing for the tutorials that I do in the ZBrush Guides, and when I'm updating the website and that sort of thing, that it's it's typing and I use the mouse a lot, I prefer to be sitting down. But anytime that I'm creative or like in a creative mode with ZBrush, Photoshop, whatever I'm doing, I'm standing up. It's just, I don't know, I feel like with more energy. I also talked about it at the beginning, about my workspace. There's actually I'm gonna update it and maybe share it on Instagram or something. But there is a ZBrush guide, a guide in ZBrush, or a tutorial walkthrough of my workspace, if you're interested. So I just name all the things that I use and how and why I use them. I might be able to update it for the 2020 because I have some new gear. But yeah, let's go back to the sculpture. We have about 5 minutes. I'm gonna turn on perspective now. And just very quickly before we wrap up today's session, I just wanna do, it's gonna be hard because I don't have, I should have got an extra reference for, because the back of the cassowary, the back of the neck, it has very intricate shapes. Let me show you. See this here? That is very particular, very intricate. So we can do that all by sculpting, or we can do a similar approach to what we did before. All of these wrinkles, that will be part of the detailing once we have the base ready. But this, I feel like it should be already part of the blockout. I just don't have. I should have got a reference for that, maybe here. It's a little bit too. It's a little bit too fainted. This one as well doesn't have a good resolution. So I think the way that this one is going to work, actually, I'm going to increase my brush size. Remember that I set up the Sculptris Pro for the smooth brush. So I'm going to remove resolution here. And then what I'll do is do a quick blockout with lines using the the damp standard brush, just to generate some of the flow of those lines. So it's kind of like straight in here, and then start to push this thing down, like the weight of it, sort of like that. So this is not detailing again, this is just some cuts that I'm doing in the model to get a sense of the flow of those details, of how I'm gonna approach this area. And then I'm actually going to push everything down a bit. And then we can use something, in fact, let me just make it a bit thinner, because the silhouette that I was following, I was considering the entire volume, but once we add these weird overlapping folds, it's going to be thicker, so we need to compensate. So I'm gonna make it slightly thinner. in there. Actually, the neck should be a bit more straight. Okay, so this part is gonna be it's gonna have all those wrinkly folded pieces, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna bring in the curved tubes with a small brush size, and we want to do it with a very small brush, and I'll show you why in a second. This is gonna be the last thing before we wrap up. So I'm gonna draw, oops, kind of this shape, and I need to make sure that it's picking up a continuous depth. So something like this. I'm just looking at the reference, and let's go back to the stroke palette. I need to fix this. I'm gonna turn off intensity, or sorry, size, and work with a smaller brush size. Right, something like this. I'm gonna click to lock this in place, and I'm gonna try to follow some of the pattern. It's pretty intricate. I mean, we can do this a little bit more thorough, like the next session, but just thought. I'm just making this up, really, this part. Whoops. No. Ooh, that was close. Okay, so this is going to be like kind of like the blocking of these pieces here. Probably have to do a bit more there. Okay, so the reason I decided to go for like a smaller size of the brush, or like a small brush size, is so that we can have control over the how much overlapping there is between each one of these pieces, so we can do inflate, for example. So I'm gonna remove this mask, and I'm going to hold Control and Shift. I think this is a single. Oh, it's not. All right, I'm gonna hold Control and Shift to select only these ones, mask them out. Oops. Invert the selection, invert the mask. So now these ones are unmasked. And then we can go ahead and use something like the inflate brush. Turn off Sculptures Pro, and I'm just going to smooth some of the initial parts of these worms, just so that it sort of flows into the rest of the neck, and then I can just go ahead and inflate this to sort of create that effect of overlapping skin. And there's going to be some areas here that we'll probably have to manually do again, but at least we have sort of control over these folds. Right, something like that. And obviously, so this is just inflating those pieces separately, but then we can take the move topological, and we can rearrange this a bit more. We can also add AccuCurve with a topology brush, and we can sort of push things. I mean, this is going to be pretty tedious, so I'm just gonna probably do this off camera or offline. Just exactly what I'm doing, but making sure that the folds make sense. So yeah, I'll do that probably after, but just wanted to show you so that you know, and it's not like one of those cooking shows that you know, you say, and now we're gonna use this ingredient, and the next step is just you have the pie ready. So I'm showing you the ingredient, but also the process of cooking it. I'm just not gonna make you watch the entire baking process, if that makes sense. So it will be something like this, and I'll spend more time making sure it flows nicely into the rest. But yeah, so I think this is it for today's session. In fact, I'm gonna invert the selection and apply a single polygroup so that I can select them easier before. And I'm just gonna push this in a bit more. Anyway, I tend to just get lost into adding these things and fix stuff. So let me go ahead and just answer some questions really quickly. We have hit the 2-hour mark now, so I have to let you guys go, and I'll probably see you next week. So stand up. Is it necessary to remesh to prepare for printing? Is it necessary to remesh to prepare for printing? Not at all. You can just what I have right now, exactly what I have now, as long as it's watertight and there's no holes, that's it. You can just send it to printing. I would probably, in this case, I will decimate it so that I use the decimation master plugin here to decimate it so that it will maintain the details and the shapes, but it's going to reduce the polygon count when where you don't need it, when you don't need as much polygons or many polygons. I think decimation, yeah. Okay, so you guys answer for me, thank you. Never use references. I wouldn't recommend that. File size 2, cool. Hi Pablo, hey Brecky, hey, how you going, man? Just saw you there. Late to the stream, happy new year to you too. Being good. I'm actually going to put the link for the first stream of the year for the extra mile course. So tomorrow, I'll see you tomorrow there. I'm gonna show you some pretty cool stuff that I've been preparing for this. Yeah. So I'll see you there, Brecky. David Lee, remesh collapse the details. Yeah, it will remove the detail. It's just basically doing a new mesh, but then that's why you project them afterwards. Ricky, I forgot to add, this is for jewelry. What did Ricky ask? Forgot. Yeah, so I guess for jewelry you will also want to do 3D printing. So yeah, as long as it is decimated, you don't have to have a perfect, working mesh with all quads and all that. You can just have a sketch and polish it, print it out, probably in castable resin, and that's good to go. Yeah, Javi, I'll see you guys tomorrow. So I'm just talking about the extra mile. So in case you don't know about it, I have a course that is called the extra mile. So we have a couple of my students are here. They're really good. Javier Forques and Brecky. So they are in the extra mile course. I don't think any other one. I don't see any other student in here. But yeah, so we do also live sessions every now and again, and I show them like different stuff. So if you're interested in the extra mile course, actually, there's gonna be an opening relatively soon. I cannot say when. But there's gonna be an opening soon for the beginning of the year, so we can have students coming in at the beginning of the year and kick off the 2020 with some great artwork. But yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it here, guys. If there's no other question, just to answer, David Lee is saying why zero mesh messes up the details. It doesn't mess up the details. It just simplify the mesh to make sure that the topology is is better for the production or to detail in the subdivision approach. So what you have to do is basically duplicate your mesh, do a series measure on the duplicate or on the original, and then use the duplicate that has all the details to project them back into the mesh that has the better topology. We can cover that next stream probably. I don't know if I'm going to ever do this with this character. I think we're gonna keep it simple, but we can give it a go. I think this is going to be just a Dynamesh sketch with color and a good prototype. That's about it. Alrighty then, so I'll see you guys next week, and Javier and Brecky, I'll see you tomorrow in the Extra Mile. Thanks so much, guys, and again, Happy New Year. And remember, I will let you know in the next week. I'll let you know about the prototyping pack that I'm putting together with some awesome artists. It's gonna be a pretty cool pack, I think. And just to remind you, it's gonna be like $20, but you know, if you buy it, it's gonna be for a good cause. I'm gonna be donating all the money that I make with this pack, that we make with this pack, to the CFA in Australia for helping out with the fires. But that's about it. All right, guys. So I'll see you next time, and thanks so much for tuning in, and have a good rest of the week. See you guys.